In today's video, I'm going to take these shirts that I got from Goodwill and make Christmas stockings.
For the first step of the stocking, I needed to make a pattern. So I took an old stocking that I had and traced it out on a piece of brown paper. In order to make up for the seam allowance, I took my finger and used that as a guide. This allowed for about a 2 centimeter seam allowance on my stocking. After tracing the stocking onto the brown paper, I went ahead and folded it in half, pinned it together so that I could cut out 2 patterns that would be the same. Don't have to do this, I just did because I was making about 14 stockings and this would save a little time when I started to cut out my material. As you can see, I'm having a hard time with my brown paper, keeping it from rolling up. The brown paper that I used to cut out the pattern came in a roll. So after I cut out the stockings, they still continued to want to roll up. So I took care of that by getting my iron out and on low heat ironed the brown paper, and it made it flat and a lot easier to work with. This would be the first of 3 different times that I needed to cut out my pattern. One time the outer decorative layer, the second time the inside layer, and then the third would be the batting, the middle layer. I would need a front and back for each stocking. Like I said, I was making about 14 different stockings. So right here, I'm actually cutting out the front and back for 2 different stockings at the same time. For the lining of the stockings, I used a drop cloth material. I just got this at Lowe's. It's cheap and I like the color and the texture of the material. But you could have used any material of your choice. I began by doubling over the material, placing my pattern on there, pinning it, and cutting it out. I repeated this process with the middle layer, the batting. I didn't show it because the batting looks just about the same as the inside lining. In review, each stocking needs 6 layers. 2 the outer layer for the decorative, for which I use the shirt for, the inside layer the lining, I use the drop cloth bar, and then the middle layer, the batting, which gives it thickness and stability. Now that I have all my pieces cut out, it's time to assemble the stocking. The bottom layer is the decorative layer. The middle layer, of course, is the batting, and then the drop cloth will be the third layer. This process will need to be repeated twice, one for the front and one from the back. It's finally time to sew. I started out by sewing the top of the front and back of each stocking together. This is going to be the rim of the stocking. I know that you're going to be able to see the seam when we fold it over, but it's going to serve as a decorative piece. I'm sure that if you had more experience sewing than I do, you could figure out how to make this not visible, but I'm gonna act like that's the way I want it. Besides, I kind of like the way it looks. I think it adds character to the stocking. For the next step, place the front and back together with the outside decorative layers facing each other, and then sew around the edge. Once you get everything stacked together and pinned, the stocking is pretty thick. It takes a little effort to be able to sew this together. There are probably easier ways to do this, but this is just the way I did it. If I can do this, anyone can. Because the stocking was so thick, I went back and trimmed the edges. This just made it not so bulky when I turned it right side out. Now it's time to turn the stocking right side out. After I turned it inside out, I went back and trimmed up the edges so that they would look a little bit neater. To make the little piece of fabric that you use to actually hang the stocking with, I did the same process. Used all 3 different layers of material and sewed a seam down the middle, approximately 6 to 8 inches in length, then went back and cut around that to make a square. Instead of sewing this in the stocking, I took a large safety pin and pinned it to the inside of the stocking. I think that would give it more support and it would not rip. But you very well could have sewed it inside of the stocking. For the finishing touches of the stockings, I just added a button that I had on hand, and then I had gotten some labels from Amazon that I put on the back. Hopefully these stockings will be a keepsake for my kids and grandkids. I got the label and put it on the back to serve as a reminder when they were made and who made them. I know I have special things that my mother and grandmother have made me, and I hold them very dear to my heart.